I just don't think you're assertive enough. Her words hit like a slap. I stared at Lauren from across the kitchen, the warmth of the morning sunlight doing nothing to soften the sharpness of her tone. She stood there, perfectly composed, stirring her coffee as if she hadn't just gutted me. Assertive? I repeated, my voice low but tight. What is that supposed to mean? It means you let people walk all over you, Ethan, she said, her eyes finally meeting mine. At work, with your friends, even with me sometimes. You're too soft. I clenched my jaw, anger simmering beneath the surface. I thought you appreciated that about me, I said. That I listen. That I care. She sighed, setting her mug down on the counter. I do. But sometimes a woman wants a man who takes control, who isn't afraid to be bold. Her words lingered in the air like smoke, suffocating and thick. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. Instead, I watched as she grabbed her purse and headed for the door, her heels clicking against the tile. I'll be late tonight, she said casually, not bothering to look back. Don't wait up. Late that night, she still wasn't home. I sat in the living room, the glow of the TV casting long shadows across the room, the dinner I'd made sitting cold on the table. When the clock struck midnight, my phone buzzed with a text. Lauren, working late. Don't worry about me. Love you. The words felt hollow, like they'd been typed out of obligation. Something about it didn't sit right, but I pushed the thought aside. I told myself she was just stressed, that things would get better. But deep down, I knew better. And a week later, I got my answer. It happened by accident. I was leaving a client meeting downtown when I spotted her across the street. Lauren was standing outside a restaurant, laughing at something a man said. He was tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of guy who exuded confidence without even trying. She touched his arm as he leaned in, their faces too close for comfort. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. My first instinct was to storm across the street, demand answers, but something stopped me. Instead, I pulled out my phone, snapping a quick photo before slipping back into the crowd. My hands were shaking as I stared at the screen, the image of them together undeniable proof of what I had already suspected. Lauren wasn't working late. She was with him. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove aimlessly, my mind racing with questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. When I finally pulled into the driveway hours later, her car was already there. The house was dark, but I could see the faint glow of her laptop from the living room window. I stepped inside, my heart pounding in my chest. She looked up when I entered, her smile forced and tired. Hey, she said softly. You're late. So are you, I replied, my voice cold. Her smile faltered, and for the first time, she looked nervous. I told you I was working late, she said, standing. Is everything okay? I stared at her, my chest tight with a mix of anger and heartbreak. Who is he, Lauren? I asked, my voice trembling. Her eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. What are you talking about? I held up my phone, the photo of her and the man outside the restaurant staring back at us. Don't lie to me, I said. I saw you. Her face drained of color, and she opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. And in that moment, I knew. Everything we'd built, everything I thought we were, was a lie. Lauren sat on the couch, her face pale, her hands gripping her knees like they were the only thing keeping her grounded. She didn't deny it. The silence between us was louder than any excuse she could have offered. Say something, I demanded, my voice cold. You've been caught, Lauren. Who is he? She stared at the floor, her lips trembling. Finally, she whispered, His name is Marcus. Marcus. The name hit me like a punch to the gut, but I kept my expression steady. And how long has this been going on? I asked, my chest tightening. Ethan, She started, her voice breaking. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. It just happened. How would you feel if your partner hid their affair for months or even years? Write in the comments. Stop saying that. I snapped, my anger boiling over. It didn't just happen. You don't accidentally meet someone, flirt, and sneak around behind your husband's back. You made a choice. Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't feel sorry for her. It started a few months ago, she admitted finally. I didn't know how to stop. You didn't know how to stop? I repeated, incredulous. How about you don't start in the first place? She flinched, but I kept going. Was it because I'm too soft? I asked bitterly. Because I don't take control the way you want me to? It wasn't about that, she said quickly, shaking her head. It wasn't about you. I laughed, the sound bitter and hollow. Of course, it wasn't about me. It never is, right? This is all about you. Your feelings, your needs. So tell me, Lauren, what did Marcus give you that I couldn't? She looked up at me, her eyes filled with guilt. It wasn't about what he gave me, she said softly. It was about how I felt with him. Confident, desired, like I could be someone else. Someone else, I repeated, my voice cold. So you destroyed us because you wanted to feel like someone else? She opened her mouth to respond, but I held up a hand, cutting her off. No, I said firmly. You don't get to explain this away. You don't get to sit there and act like this is some kind of identity crisis. You lied to me, Lauren. You betrayed me. And for what? A fling with some guy who probably doesn't even care about you. Her tears fell harder, and she covered her face with her hands. I didn't mean for it to get this far, she sobbed. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and heartbreak. And now, you don't get to decide how this ends. She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. What are you going to do? She asked, her voice shaking. I stared at her, the woman I'd once thought I'd spend the rest of my life with, and felt a surge of clarity. You'll see, I said quietly. But I'm done being soft, Lauren. You're about to see just how assertive I can be. Her sobs echoed through the house as I turned and walked out the door, my mind already racing with plans. Lauren thought she could humiliate me, but she had no idea what was coming next. The plan came together faster than I expected. It was equal parts anger and necessity that drove me to act, but by the time I walked into Lauren's office building a week later, every detail had been meticulously planned. The reception area was buzzing with the usual morning chaos, phones ringing, heels clicking against the marble floors. I walked past the front desk, ignoring the curious glance from the receptionist. Lauren worked on the 10th floor, and her company was holding a quarterly meeting in the main conference room, a fact I'd learned from the calendar she still hadn't bothered to take off the fridge. I stepped into the elevator, my heart pounding in my chest as I clutched the folder under my arm. Inside were all the receipts, text messages I'd pulled from our shared phone plan, photos of her with Marcus outside the restaurant, and screenshots of his overly familiar comments on her social media posts. It was everything I needed to expose her and him for the liars they were. When I reached the conference room, the doors were open, and I could hear the low hum of voices inside. Lauren sat near the front, her perfect posture radiating confidence as she smiled at something the woman next to her said. Marcus was there too, seated a few chairs down, his expression relaxed and smug. The sight of them in the same room sent a fresh wave of anger coursing through me. I stepped into the room, and the chatter slowly died down as people noticed me. Lauren turned, her smile faltering the moment she saw me. Her eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. "Ethan?" she said, her voice a mixture of shock and confusion. "What are you doing here?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked to the front of the room, every eye on me as I set the folder on the table. "Sorry to interrupt," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "But I have something important to share with everyone." Lauren shot out of her seat, her face pale. "Ethan, don't sit down," I said sharply, my eyes locking on hers. She froze, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, before reluctantly sinking back into her chair. I turned to the room, scanning the curious faces of her colleagues. "Lauren and I have been married for 5 years," I began, my voice calm and deliberate. "I thought we had a good thing. I thought she was loyal. But as it turns out, I was wrong." I opened the folder, pulling out the first photo, the one of her and Marcus outside the restaurant. "This is Lauren and Marcus," I said, holding it up for everyone to see. Gasps rippled through the room, followed by murmurs of disbelief. Marcus stiffened in his seat, his confident demeanor slipping as he glanced at Lauren. "Ethan, this isn't the place," he started, but I cut him off. "Oh, I think it is," I said, my voice rising. "You see, Marcus, while you were sneaking around with my wife, you forgot one important thing. Actions have consequences." I pulled out a stack of text messages, holding them up like evidence in a courtroom. Here are the messages they sent each other. The late-night meetups, the excuses to work late. It's all here. Lauren buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking as the room buzzed with whispers. Marcus, on the other hand, sat frozen, his jaw clenched, his hands gripping the edges of his chair. "I trusted you, Lauren," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "I built a life with you, and this is how you repay me. By sneaking around with this." I gestured to Marcus, my anger flaring again. "Coward?" "That's enough," Marcus said, standing abruptly. "You've made your point. Now leave." I stepped closer, the anger radiating off me. "No, Marcus," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "I'm not leaving. Not until everyone here knows exactly who you are. You're not just a cheater, you're a liar. And I won't let you pretend otherwise." The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. Lauren looked up at me, her face streaked with tears, her expression a mix of guilt and despair. "Ethan, please," she whispered. "Stop." But I wasn't done. "You told me I wasn't assertive enough, Lauren," I said, my voice shaking. "Well, here's me taking control. I'm done being your punching bag. I'm done being the man you take for granted." I turned to leave, the folder still sitting on the table as evidence of their betrayal. Before I walked out, I looked back at her one last time. "I hope he was worth it," I said quietly, "because you just lost the best thing you ever had." The door closed behind me, muffling the chaos I'd left in my wake. For the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of peace. Lauren had wanted a real man. Now she could see what that looked like, and I was finally free. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. The confrontation at Lauren's office sent shockwaves through her professional life. Mutual friends started calling, asking what had happened, their voices a mix of shock and curiosity. I didn't give them the full story, only what they needed to know. She cheated. I exposed her. That was enough. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Theo. "Have you seen Lauren's LinkedIn?" he asked, his voice laced with something between amusement and pity. "No," I replied, leaning back in my chair. "Why?" "She's looking for a new job," he said. "Looks like the whole office turned on her after what happened." Word spread fast. I didn't know how to feel about that. On one hand, I didn't set out to ruin her career. But on the other, she'd brought this on herself. Actions have consequences, and she was finally facing hers. A month passed, and I began to rebuild. My apartment felt emptier without her things, but it also felt lighter. The weight of her lies was gone, replaced by a quiet sense of relief. I focused on work, went out with friends more often, and even started going to the gym again. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living for myself. One evening, as I was sorting through some old boxes, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Lauren. "Can we talk? Please?" I stared at the screen, the familiar ache threatening to creep back in. But instead of responding, I set the phone down and went back to unpacking. Whatever she had to say, I didn't need to hear it. A week later, I ran into her at a coffee shop. It wasn't planned. I'd stopped by to grab something before work, and there she was, sitting alone in the corner. She looked different. Her once perfect hair was tied back in a loose bun, and her eyes were shadowed with regret. When she saw me, her face lit up with a flicker of hope. "Ethan," she said, standing hesitantly. "Hi." I nodded, keeping my tone neutral. "Hi, Lauren." She fidgeted with the strap of her bag, her confidence visibly shaken. "I wasn't expecting to see you," she said. "How have you been?" "Better," I said simply. Her face fell slightly, but she nodded. "That's good," she said softly. "You deserve to be." We stood there in awkward silence for a moment before she spoke again. "Ethan, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need you to know how sorry I am. For everything." I studied her, searching for any trace of the woman I'd once loved. But all I saw was someone trying to piece together the life she'd shattered. "Why now?" I asked. "Why not when it mattered?" She looked down, her voice trembling. "Because I didn't realize what I had until I lost it. I thought I needed something more, but all I did was destroy the best thing in my life." Her words hung in the air, but they didn't hit the way they once would have. I felt nothing, no anger, no sadness, just a quiet detachment. "I hope you figure things out," I said finally. "But I've moved on." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "Take care, Ethan," she said softly. "You too," I replied, turning to leave. That night, I sat on the balcony of my new place, a drink in hand, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Lauren's betrayal had broken something in me, but it had also forced me to rebuild. And for that, I was oddly grateful. She had wanted a real man, but she never understood that strength wasn't about dominance or control. It was about knowing your worth and walking away when someone didn't see it. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, free, whole, and ready to start again.